LARP is a word that entered the common English lexicon a few years ago. It is derived from the abbreviation of live-action role play. This is an activity where people use the tabletop rules of a role-playing game, like Dungeons & Dragons, and act out their game in the real world, hence the term live action. LARPers, as these players are called, go into nature wearing costumes representing their chosen characters. They are also armed with harmless versions of real weapons, styrofoam swords for knights, soft-tipped arrows for elves, or little red bean bags instead of fireballs for magicians. If that sounds a little strange and perhaps awkward to you, you are not alone. It's hard not to point out that no matter how seriously LARPers take their hobby, it all boils down to an elaborate game of play pretend, which is fine if you're into that game. What's not so fine is that our government is also clearly a big fan of LARPing, i.e. playing pretend. Earlier in 2022, Democrats pretended that they cared about inflation by trying to pass their Inflation Reduction Act, which included about $1 trillion in spending and tax increases. Taxing your way out of inflation is about as far from reality as you can get. It would have been more honest and perhaps even more successful if they called it their act to provide every American a magic flying pony. Perhaps the reason there's such a strong ideological overlap between bureaucrats and Hollywood is because both are expert pretenders. It's clear that when it comes to pretending, our government is as committed to their roles as anyone in Hollywood. But when it comes to real issues like the tragic Afghanistan pullout or our defenseless southern border, not so much. In fact, they're abject failures. A couple of weeks ago, we were faced with having yet another set of enforced play-pretend arguments foisted upon us. One is that Trump is too radioactive to be considered a viable candidate for 2024. Another lie is that a vote for anyone other than Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House would result in the anointing of Democrat Hakeem Jeffries as a minority party Speaker over a Republican majority House. Of course, neither of these have turned out to be true, as Trump is still campaigning, and Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and others succeeded in getting concessions from Kevin McCarthy. So the Republicans still got their Speaker of the House, but instead of getting one who is never held accountable, they made it so he actually has to answer to the America First wing of the party. This group endured withering criticism from mainstream media pundits and fellow Republicans alike, as they sought to do what has not happened in 100 years. Take the vote for Speaker to multiple ballots. Despite the hand-wringing that these 20 Republicans were destroying our fragile democracy, the end result was actually something that many Republicans, including McCarthy himself, were satisfied with in the end. Far from being a departure from the usual state of politics, using the vote for Speaker to push through a number of smart promises and reform measures is actually a return to how our government used to function.